And we're going to be covering the commissioning BP or business process in Unifier. Although it is the longest workflow of any business process in Unifier, it's actually a fairly simple one, and that it's just a review and revise if needed process repeated with each iteration of the commissioning plan, which is just attached to the record in Unifier, and then sent out for review and then updated at each stage. So the commissioning record, so typically there should only be one. So in the case of design review or RFIs, they'll have multiple records. What's different with commissioning is it gets updated as you go. So we're not creating separate commissioning records. It's just one record that is continuously updated throughout until the final report is approved. So this is one of those that will be in a workflow for the duration of the project, for those projects with commissioning. This is created by the project coordinator or the commissioning authority if they're in the system. There's not a lot of information to fill out. Most of the information is simply within the commissioning plan itself, which becomes an attachment to the record and then is sent out for review. So when we send it out for review, it's going to go to the PM planner, contractor and designer who are not in the system at this point. If the commissioning authority is in-house, ideally they'd be creating it. Catherine, I don't know if B has added all of them as users, or is that because that's just Zach's team? Each review has a duration of 5 working days, just so we can track and keep it moving along and making sure the review doesn't hang out there. But to Catherine's point, if it is an in-house commissioning authority, this is one case where that individual is going to be different for every project. And so unlike the reviewers who are available by default for every project, that will be something that the project coordinator will have to add. So they'll have to create a user management record to add the internal commissioning authority to the project and make sure they get put in the commissioning authority group. Okay, so the record is created, plan is attached, it's sent for review to the PM planner. Now the contractor and designer aren't in the system, so they will have to review it outside of Unifier. If it needed to get sent back to the commissioning authority, they would select revise for any revisions to the plan based on their comments. Once it's approved by all the reviewers, it just goes back to the commissioning authority to update the plan for the next iteration. Now, not every project has concept SD, DD, CD. So you'll see from creation, we can submit concept, the commissioning plan for a concept, or we can go straight to schematic design. And from schematic design, we can go either to design development or straight to construction documents. So if your project doesn't have a DD phase or a concept phase, the workflow allows you to move on to that next phase. But again, the process essentially repeats. Oh, and thanks, Catherine, for the clarification that the documents that are being reviewed that are attached are the basis of design and the owner's project requirements. So again, we're seeing that just that review, revise, and update at each stage. You'll see on the form there's actually a comments box for the reviewers to put in any comments. After CD is the pre-construction. After pre-construction, the preliminary report will be reviewed, and then the final report will be reviewed. And then once approved, it goes back to the commissioning authority to close. If for whatever reason they have a last minute change, they can send an update and resubmit the final report. But it'll be the commissioning authority, if internal, or the project coordinator on their behalf, closing it at the end of the project. Okay, so really long workflow, but it's really essentially just a repetition of the same 3 steps: reviewing it, revisions if necessary, and then going back to the commissioning authority to update the documents. Again, those documents are being created outside of Unifier and being attached. Because the review steps are consensus, it might be difficult for you to follow along in your review project. So for this one, I'd recommend just watching me as I push this record through the workflow, because the review steps require everyone to respond. So commissioning can be found under the governance management. There's only one workflow, so there's no options when you click create. And the first thing to fill out is the commissioning authority, so whether or not they're internal or external, and then their contact information. So I'm just going to volunteer Zach for this one. When the commissioning authority is internal, it doesn't require a company name and address. If the commissioning authority is external, then it will require their company name and address. And actually, I'm just going to put myself as the commissioning authority so I can push this through. That's all we're doing. On this first step, you'll see down below there's a block for each phase indicating the approval date and then any comments from the PM, planner, designer, contractor, design, build. And that's to capture comments at each phase, and then again for the preliminary report and final report. There is no line item form. There's just a what we refer to as an upper form, so you don't see any other tabs. And I'll be just attaching a PDF to represent the commissioning documents. All right. There's a lot of questions going on right now in chat, so I think I'm going to pause for just a second and unmute.
So commissioning has not been well organized within our department. It's been sort of, a piece of it has been addressed through mechanical MEP commissioning that Shannon or Jacob have done on several projects. Commissioning with, I like to call a capital C, is all encompassing. And this training today isn't going to talk about the where and why and wherefores of commissioning. I will get with Zach and Mike and get that as a presentation to the D&C group, because we do have a lot of new people. And the commissioning process is still kind of a work in progress. We did work with Zach on this unifier layout. It's very basic, as stating, we're just keeping the current status of the two documents, the basis of design and the owner's project requirements. In the past, Zach's group has only focused on MEP things, but it does also encompass building envelope. It can also encompass the quality of the design finishes, and several other items like that. I think that will answer your questions. It can be required on a non-capital project, depending on what that scope is. If you're replacing the entire mechanical system of a building as a non-capital project, then there's probably commissioning on that mechanical system. Are there any other questions to that I can forward to Zach?
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
So
Hi, Dina.
I think we lost Dina. Okay. Because the contractor and designer aren't in the system.
Mm-hmm.
How do we want to capture their comments for the review, or is the PM
my initial thought on this is that the attachments that they send out, that we're attaching, so we attach the original basis of design or owner project requirements, and those, when they're simple, I don't know. One thought is we just send those out through Adobe Review, or it's a Word document with markup review comments, and we capture it that way and just keep updating the document. But it's a good question. I'm making a note to think about it with the group.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and send this into workflow. Just so we can demonstrate the workflow as it is. Again, we can submit concept. If your project doesn't have concept, you can go straight to SD. Because it is a pretty long workflow, I'm going to go. I'm going to skip DD, but I've attached the documents for concept, so I better review. It's currently pre-assigned to the PM planner, designer, and contractor with a 5 working day review period. So the purpose of the business process really is to track the evolution of those documents and the commissioning report throughout the life of the project and to capture the status. So now I've sent that in for review. It's created a task for the PM. Commissioning sent for review of concept. So it's telling us it's review and then at what state we're at in the design of the project. I'll accept the task. And then the only fields I'll be able to edit here are in the concept design phase because that's where we're at. Now, Zach wanted dedicated comments boxes on the form as opposed to using general comments. So that's why we see those dedicated boxes here. I know it's different on some business processes, and of course comments is always available, but here we wanted to track on the form the comments at each design phase. Now you'll note that all of the fields are actually available to me. So it's a kind of a unifier thing where if you have access to the form, you can edit any of the boxes. And so part of this is, you know, only using your comments box. The audit log will catch if you've changed someone else's, but we're using the honor system here. And once it moves past concept, these become read-only and locked, so we can't go back and change previous comments. So I'd be reviewing the attachments. If I had any comments, I'd be entering them here. And then click send. Two options. I can revise. So if based on my review, we needed to make some change to the documents, some requirement was missed, or there was something wrong with one of the documents, it will go back to the creator. So if it was internal commissioning authority, it would go back to them. But the end goal is to have a final approved version at the end of each design phase. So if I didn't have any issues, I would select approve concept. In this case, it only went to me as the project manager for comment. If it went to others, they would also be adding their comments and approving as well. And then it goes back to the commissioning authority for the next update. So when I click send, the commissioning record creates a task for the commissioning authority. If I go back to my commissioning business process, I'll see that the status is now changed to hold for SD update, meaning we've gotten past concept and now we're just waiting for the SD update. Again, those documents are being updated outside of Unifier and then being attached. So once they're ready with that updated version, they can come into their task list, accept the task, and update those documents. Again, we have to accept the task to take action on it. And then just to demonstrate again that idea of revising an attachment, it can even have a separate file name. So if I've got updated documents from concept now at SD, I can select revise and browse for my SD documents. And it captures that there's a revised file name. And again, the check mark under the revisions column is telling us that there is a revision. And then as we move on, those are being captured. When it comes back to the update step, this commissioning authority contact information does become editable if they need to update their contact information. The approval date for concept was captured when I approved and took that action. If there were multiple reviewers, it would capture the date and time of the last person to approve. Okay, so I've made my updates. I'm ready to send this out for review. So I have two options here. This was just for flexibility. So right now I'm ready to submit SD, but if for whatever reason I needed to resubmit concept, we wanted to keep that option available, just in case there was some change or the project got put on hold and we needed to revisit the documents again, still at concept. We're ready for SD, so I'm going to select SD. Again, going out to the PM with a 5-day task duration. It's also going to list the contractor and designer here, but they're not in the system, so you won't see any names. If I go back to my commissioning log, just to again check the status, we can see that it is updated now, that we've submitted it. It's at SD review. So the PM now has a task to review again. Just like we did at concept, we're going to take a look at the documents and add our comments. The only difference now is the documents are updated and my comments box is in a different block. So I'll still be able to see my comments from concept, but now I'll enter my new comments here. And then sends. Again, I can revise or approve. If I approve, it goes to update the commissioning plan for SD/DD. Commissioning authority gets a task. So we've passed our SD approval. So that will be noted now on the form. So I scroll down to SD design. We have an approval date and time. So now the commissioning authority is going to hold on to this, excuse me, until they have updated documents. And again, we can come in here and replace these. Again, Unifier is keeping track of all prior versions, so nothing is lost. So let's say this project doesn't have a DD phase. We can go from SD to CD. So I'll just demonstrate that. Gonna put in my CD plan. If I open this, again, as you may have seen, Unifier is always going to show the most recent version, and we'll just list prior versions below. So if I want to see those other versions, I can. So I can go back to SD and concept. I'll go ahead and hit send. You'll see I'll have 3 options now. I can resubmit SD if I needed to. I can go straight to CD, or I can go to DD and skip. I'm going to skip DD and go straight to construction documents. Again, task for the PM to review. Now this seems very repetitive because we're doing it all at once, but of course this is taking course over weeks and months of a project. So PM gets a task sent for review CD. They will accept. Again, review the documents and put their comments in the CD block. And then send. For the pre-construction update. So as you can see, it's the same process at each phase. Nothing from an execution standpoint in Unifier changes as you go. So I know we're scheduled till 10:45. So I don't think I'm going to get this all the way through the end, but the process is the same for each phase. After pre-construction is the preliminary report and then the final report, and it's the commissioning authority who will then do the final close of the record at the end of the workflow. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.